when you're done, just put it on the. Yeah, that's it. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yashodanandana Bhajana Ranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pradikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Pradikacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, I think this is not quite in the right place. I don't think so. Did we read text 46? I think that's what we maybe have read that one. By worshiping the Lord through one's own work, then one attain perfection. Yeah, we read this one.
Oh, I thought that, sorry, I thought it was on 48.
No, text 47. Yeah, 40. All right, we're going to be on page 688. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. On this 10th day of July, 2023 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace HG Dravida Dasa Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 18, conclusion, the perfection of renunciation. Text number 47 at the bottom of page 688. Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunaha Padadharmat Swanushtitat Swabhava Niyatam Karma Kurvan Napnoti Kilbisham Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Padadharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Padadharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham. Ishtadev. Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham. No? No, Shreyan. Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham. Bhakta Krish. Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham. You want to have a go at it? Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham. Shreyan Swadharmo Vigunach Paradharmat Swanushtitat Swabhavaniyatam Karma Kurvanapnoti Kilbisham. Word by words. Shreyan, better, Swadharmaha, one's own occupation, Vigunaha, imperfectly performed, Paradharmat, then another's occupation, Su Anushtitat, perfectly done. Swabhavaniyatam, prescribed according to one's nature, Karma, work, Kurvan, performing, Na, never, Apnoti, achieves, Kilbisham, sinful reactions. Translation. It is better to engage in one's own occupation, even though one may perform it imperfectly, than to accept another's occupation and perform it perfectly. Duties prescribed according to one's nature are never affected by sinful reactions. Purport. One's occupational duty is prescribed in the Bhagavad Gita. As already discussed in previous verses, the duties of a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra are prescribed according to their particular modes of nature. One should not imitate another's duty. A man who is by nature attracted to the kind of work done by Shudras should not artificially claim to be a Brahman, although he may have been born into a Brahman family. In this way, one should work according to his own nature. No work is abominable if performed in the service of the Supreme Lord. The occupational duty of a Brahman is certainly in the mode of goodness, but if a person is not by nature in the mode of goodness, he should not imitate the occupational duty of a Brahman. For a Kshatriya or administrator, there are so many abominable things. A Kshatriya has to be violent to kill his enemies, and sometimes a Kshatriya has to tell lies for the sake of diplomacy. Such violence and duplicity accompany political affairs, but a Kshatriya is not supposed to give up his occupational duty and try to perform the duties of a Brahman. One should act to satisfy the Supreme Lord. For example, Arjuna was a Kshatriya. He was hesitating to fight the other party. But if such fighting is performed for the sake of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, there need be no fear of degradation. In the business field also, sometimes a merchant has to tell so many lies to make a profit. If he does not do so, there can be no profit. Sometimes the merchant says, "Oh, my dear customer, for you I am making no profit." But one should know that without profit, the merchant cannot exist. Therefore, it should be taken as a simple lie if a merchant says that he is not making a profit. But the merchant should not think that because he is engaged in an occupation in which the telling of lies is compulsory, he should give up his profession and pursue the profession of a Brahman. That is not recommended. Whether one is a Kshatriya, a Vaishya, or a Shudra doesn't matter, if he serves by his work the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Brahmins, who perform different types of sacrifice, sometimes must kill animals, because sometimes animals are sacrificed in such ceremonies. Similarly, if a Kshatriya engaged in his own occupation kills an enemy, there is no sin incurred. In the 3rd chapter, these matters have been clearly and elaborately explained. Every man should work for this purpose of yajna, or for Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anything done for personal sense gratification is a cause of bondage. The conclusion is that everyone should be engaged according to the particular mode of nature he has acquired, and he should decide to work only to serve the supreme cause of the Supreme Lord. Om Jnana Timarandrasya Jnanandana Salakaya Chakshur Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance to him and all members of Sri Parampara. So I think we may have read this one. But anyway, no harm. So, Krishna here is speaking. This is the end of a section in the 18th chapter where he's describing different aspects of our life according to 3 modes of nature. It's important to understand that the material energy works according to these modes. And we experience them all the time. We just don't call them the mode of passion. For instance, when you see someone or you yourself are very much in the mood of enjoying the senses, and you want to try to plan for that, and I can make some money so I can buy this and go there and do this and enjoy and so forth. This is the mode of passion. If you're just saying, I can't want to do anything today, let me just sleep in till 12. I used to do that when I was going to high school. You know, get up at 7 every day and run off to school, and then on Sunday, just sleep into 11, 12, So that's characterized mode of ignorance. Sleeping, procrastination, laziness, and basically you're trying to enjoy shutting things out, just kind of going into a void position. Sometimes that leads to drug usage, things like that. Now the mode of goodness, which is a very nice and very important stepping off point for transcendental consciousness, is characterized by a lack of interest in extreme pleasures of the senses, and in being inquisitive about philosophical matters, interested in peaceful natural environments. Basically, it's a
more calm and what we call sattvic, well, that describing Lord of goodness, frame of mind in which you're more receptive to matters of the spirit and philosophical matters like that. So that mode of goodness is characteristic of certain people in stations of life in the world. And in the Bhagavad Gita, in the Vedic culture, there's these basic four qualities or four orders of, let's say, occupations. And there's also four spiritual orders. So the Prabhupada is talking about the Brahman. He means don't imitate the Brahman, right? So the Brahman, the characteristics were given in the Bhagavad Gita: truthful, clean, merciful, studious, religious, and austere, renounced. Living as simply as possible. And oftentimes you'll be born in a Brahmin family and you'll be trained as a Brahmin. But it's not always like that. You may be born in a Brahmin family, but you don't have the character or the activities and the character of a Brahmin. But in India especially, because things have gotten a little bit disjointed, the birth is overemphasized too much. You may be born in a Brahmin family because that affords certain privileges in society. Then you're supposed to be the spiritual master, basically, of the other members. But if you don't have those qualities, then it becomes a kind of a corruption of the caste system. Caste means a rigid caste system. So Krishna is talking about it, but he's saying he created it, but it's for the smooth organization of society. If someone has a Shudra, he may be attracted to working with his hands. I remember when I grew up, a lot of my friends, they got into working on cars and everything. I never could do that. I wasn't attracted to it. I wasn't even good in shop, hitting nails and things. But I was very into reading and studying and things like that. So, and then someone who, you may have known, someone who's really good at making money, legally, We had someone here who was like that many years ago. His name was Sunarma. He got reinitiated with another name. But he started a business here, for the temple. I think it was called Yogi Bars. No, it was called Bliss Bars. Bliss Bars. And these were health food bars, made. It was just getting very popular in society. He started here in it wasn't called a lounge, but there was a stove and there was a kitchen in there. And he would cook up some bars with, oats and this and that, and then he would have the devotees taste it. And so I said, you need a little salt, okay, we'll do another bar. So in this way, he created a business. Then it expanded. It was too big for the things, and so he had a place up about 10 miles away, kind of a little factory, and devotees would work there, But everything he did, that was one of the things he did. He was able to make a profit, So that's the Vaishya mentality. That's a business. And in the Vedic culture, there's a big thing with cow protection. Cow protection. Krishna was a cowboy. He was a cow herd boy. And the whole thing was, herding the cows for milk, because milk products, you learn in ISKCON, there's so many things you can do with milk you don't know. It's not just milk. There's curd and there's sandesh and there's all these sweets and there's all kinds of things you can do. So the cows are a form of wealth, but Vaishyas can just be merchants of different kinds. Bankers also can be, And then you have the largest group, which is those who are good with their hands and they, perform manual labor. So what Krishna is saying here is that don't try to imitate a higher occupation. Be satisfied in doing your own work. And if you do it nicely, and then an essential element, there's also a very important of giving the results, as much of the results as you can for Krishna. Then it becomes perfect. And he said that in the previous verse, text 46, by worship of the Lord, who is the source of all beings and who is all-pervading, a man can attain perfection through performing his own work. And the meaning doesn't come out 100%. By worshiping of the Lord, by performing one's own work, the Lord being the source of all. If one can worship through one's work, then you can attain perfection. You don't have to do anything radical. Oh, if I want to attain God, I got to go 1,000,000 miles away, go into the forest and meditate, all right, or doing something. It's always that integrate Krishna conscious, spiritual life into your life. Yes, there has to be certain adjustments, but there's no need to do anything radical, disrupt your whole life, and then probably not be able to follow. There's a nice verse. This morning we had a class in which this verse came up, in which Lord Brahma, who's what's known in the Western philosophy as demiurge, the one who actually engineered the whole world, not God himself, but God's first deputy, so to speak. He has these prayers to Krishna. Now it's amazing because this Brahma, he lives for an inconceivably long time. He has 4 heads. He engineers everything. He's very super brilliant. He's the head of our sampradaya. Krishna taught Bhagavatam to him, and he spoke it to his son. So but when Krishna came to the world 5,000 years ago, he disguised his divinity. He especially with his intimate devotees. He's a little boy. He's like 5 years old, and he's a calf herd. He's not even a cow herd yet. And there's a whole scene. And so Brahma comes down, and he can't believe that this is actually God. That this is my father. This is this doesn't compute. And so he plays a trick on Krishna, and then comes back, and Krishna, he expands himself into all these cows and boys, and so at the end of it all, Brahma is offering these prayers. Even though he's big Brahma, he's offering the prayer that God is disguising himself or taking this form. So one of his main prayers there has to do with this, not needing to overhaul your whole life and disrupt everything, because it's very important to integrate this practice rather than have a revolution. So he says exactly this. He says, Gyane priyasamadupasyanamantaheва jivanti sanmukaditam bhavadiya vartam stane stita shutigatam tanuvam manobir ye prayaso ajitadijo prasitaistri lokyam. So he says, give up the speculative process, trying to figure it all out on your own. You have to recognize, like I start every class, many devotees do, with this prayer at the beginning of the introduction to Bhagavad Gita. Om Jnana Timirandasya, that I was born in the darkness of ignorance. Ajnana Timirandasya, Jnanandjana Shalakya. But my spiritual master, really what it says, he performed a medical treatment in coating my eyes with the salve of knowledge so that I could see. In other words, he really opened my eyes to the truth. And so I glorify him as part of the parampara. In other words, he also received his knowledge from the spiritual master, received the spiritual master, all the way back to Krishna. Now that knowledge, that same knowledge, is embodied here in this Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is speaking to us through the Bhagavad Gita, and his dear devotee, realized devotee, is explaining it in these purports. So we're in a very fortunate position. We weren't born at the time when Krishna was on the planet, or even Lord Chaitanya was on the planet. But it doesn't matter, because Krishna is present through his words here, and we can get the same benefit. So what Brahma is saying, just give up that speculative effort on your own, and hear the vibrations from the realized souls. And if you do that, then you can develop love for Krishna. And that's the final goal of life. And in this way, you can conquer him. In other words, Krishna responds reciprocally to our activity, surrender, and our mood. And that's the only way to do it. Is that you can't do it just on your own. I'm going to investigate who is God, what is God. The big philosophers, Western philosophers, they have all these theories and everything. But they differ from each other. And you don't find that they're completely peaceful and blissful in their life. It's always that a lot of it is like a lot of anxiety, because they go down some dead end in their philosophy. And so I investigated that. I was studying Western philosophy. It's ironic. I went to NYU for maybe a couple of semesters, and I took a philosophy course, Philosophy 101. And they went through the old philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, more modern, Heidegger, and Schopenhauer, and all these guys, And you know who was teaching it? An Indian guy who had given up all of this, and he took a Western philosophy. But I didn't find out, how can we find out a firm grounding of moral and ethical rules and things like that? I was looking for something like that. But it was all very relativistic. And speculation. So Brahma says, no, find someone who's realized and hear from them. So we're hearing from that now, and Krishna is telling us to find a kind of work you're comfortable with that matches your mode, what you're into, and engage in that in a sinless way, and as much as possible engage the fruits for the service of the Lord, and hear the Bhagavad Gita, and engage in the process of devotional service of yoga, bhakti yoga, chanting the name and so forth. And in this way you can make substantial progress. Okay, any questions or comments on this particular verse? Then we'll go on. Oh, you have a question? Yeah, go ahead. We need a mic. Go ahead, Krishna.
Thank you. So I have two questions. I actually had three, but I think the third one slipped my mind. The first one is, so Srila Prabhupada is known as saying that we're creating, we're bringing in these young men and women into the movement to create more of the Brahminical class. So, how does this apply, this particular, text? How does that I guess statement from Prabhupada apply to the text 47? And then the second one is, how does that apply in turn for the current age, which is the Kali Yuga, where it's known that, or it's stated that all of us are Shudras at this point, because of the degradation of this age. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
All right. So what is that verse? Janmana Jayate Shudra or something. I think it means that everyone in this age is more or less born a Shudra. But there is the process, as shown by Lord Chaitanya, that anyone can be lifted up. In other words, these qualities, although we may be born with them and cultivated them, they can be radically changed by the powerful process of Krishna consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada showed that. And it's right in the Bhagavatam. There's this famous, Prabhupada would quote all the time, Kiratu hunanda pulinda pulkasha abeda shumba javanakasharya yenye cha papa yadapashayashaya shuddhanti tasmai prabhavishnave namaha. The word shuddhanti means purified. So he's listing various groups that are outside of the Vedic culture. I think I remember the Khasa is one of the groups. Kiratu hunanda pulinda abeda shumba javanakasharya, and etc. The Khasas are like Chinese, Japanese, like they're outside of India and they're outside of India. But he says those and the others that are outside of India and they're scattered all over the world, even they can become purified by taking shelter of someone who's taking shelter of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada proved that. He went to all continents, and those who were so far away from the Vedic culture. Even he came to the Lower East Side. He came to Manhattan, New York. At the time, Krishna arranged it right in the middle of the hippie era. Now, why was that important? Because there was a certain mood of experimentation in the air. Opening up the mind, LSD and everything. Now, I'm not recommending that. Probably didn't recommend it, but it had an effect of kind of shaking up your worldview and your self-view. And people became interested in Eastern thought like that. So he was right in the middle of that. So, but the point is that if one is ready to surrender, to take on the four regulative principles, for instance, which is not easy, but it's possible, and especially if one is serious about chanting the holy name. This chanting of this mantra is central to the whole practice. And it is the main thing that Lord Chaitanya gave as the means of purification in this age. And he showed, Jagai Madai, they had fallen so far from the Brahminical culture. And they were criminals, they were dacoits, they were drunkards, But they surrendered to Lord Chaitanya and they became purified, and he gave them pure love of God, no more crime, And in this age, Nityananda was telling Lord Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya was about to kill him because they had injured Nityananda, this story. And he said, no, my Lord, everyone in this age is more or less like that. So you come to save them, so you say these two Jagamati as examples.
He said there's something like the demoniac entities are within all within all of the bodies, right? Like before they were kind of externalized, and there was actually
the demons have they taken birth within the hearts of the but that's exactly what the mantra does. Cheto dharpana marjanam. You can completely overhaul your whole nature, your outlook, yourself, your character by chanting the holy name, because the holy name is none different from Krishna himself, and Krishna is like the sun. He can purify and he can transform. So that's very enlivening. Now, how does it fit into this?
From what it sounds like, it's almost like a loophole. The mantra, the Maha Mantra, is a loophole to circumvent that process and allow, just any, not anybody, but like you said, the people that are willing to devote themselves.
And the thing is, for myself, I wasn't suited to be a farmer. I did my share of menial service when I came to the temple. But when I was able to, Krishna arranged, I joined in the one temple in the world where they were producing the books. There was no foreign BBTs or anything. There wasn't even a BBT. Wow. ISKCON Press. That was all there was. And it happened to be where I joined, Brooklyn, in New York in 1973. 2 years later, they moved to LA. If I had joined a few years later, I would never gotten this service, So, but it was very suitable for me. I was always a great fault finder. And so that's what proofreading is. Mm-hmm. You're finding fault, but they want those faults to be found so they can be fixed. Anyway, I've been doing it ever since for 50 years, and I've been satisfied. And one of the reasons I was able to last, because a lot of devotees came and left from the press, I was perfectly satisfied just finding a missing comma or this or that, and making it that way. Not anything very exotic or, But that was my deity worship. The books were my deities, and I was, changing them. And to this day, when I find, it's kind of perverse, because if I find a mistake, okay, I can fix the mistake, and that's my service. But the point is that I found something I was really comfortable with. Now, some devotees, they'll find they're really attracted to deity worship, which is wonderful service. It's preaching, it helps the whole temple, it's beautiful. But still, they have to, like many devotees, they come and do deity worship, but they have business outside, because they have to sustain, like that. But the consciousness is, okay, I'm doing this to sustain so I can do the deity worship. That's really what purpose in life. So, in one sense, it's not that you try to do someone else's service, but that you do Krishna consciousness and you find out the kind of service that you're most comfortable to do for Krishna. And oftentimes it's related to what you would have been done materially, but it's a whole different mood because you're doing it for Krishna and you're able to do it. So in a sense that Lord Chaitanya kind of, and Prabhupada mentions this, that Lord Krishna in this Bhagavad Gita, in a few verses we'll read, 18 verses or so, 19, surrender unto me, and I will relieve you of all sinful actions, do not worry. That central verse, Sarva Dharma Parityajya. But, so he demanded surrender. You surrender. Lord Chaitanya didn't demand that. You don't worry about anything, you just chant. Just chant Hare Krishna. Now, when you chant Hare Krishna, if you have a little, concentration, you do it for some time, that's a form of surrender. Because you're fixing your mind on Krishna, and Krishna is then purifying from within and changing everything. But it doesn't feel like surrender. It feels like a party, right? Sankirtan party. So that was Lord Chaitanya's great genius. Green genius, it's Krishna. But unique, that he turned yoga into a celebration. That's fantastic. And it can sweep the whole world. So it's a little different from what Krishna's saying, but the basic principle is there. All right, let's go on. Text 48. Did you have something to do also to ask? You're okay.
Yeah, I had one question.
Yeah. You just put it in the mic because we have an audience on YouTube.
I'm curious to know how does one know what their duties are and what their nature is if they weren't prescribed any at birth, especially in our society where we don't have classes.
Yeah. Well,
necessarily.
The best thing to do, if you have the ability to do it, is to spend time at a temple. And, everybody, no matter who they are, they start with some menial service, which just kind of cleanses, your mood. Because the whole thing in Krishna consciousness is it's opposite to what you need to so-called succeed out there, which is, go get 'em, thing, and kind of dominant and it's climbing on other people's shoulders, and it's not like that. It's very much surrender. That's why there's so much bowing down, because you're recognizing, okay, Krishna, please take charge of my life and enlighten me what to do. And you soon find out that, there's so many things that you can do that they're not complicated, but it sets up the mood. And if you proceed in it and you're serious about chanting and hearing and progressing, then it becomes obvious what you can do. It becomes revealed. It's not something artificial, So that's the best thing to do. Is that don't make any radical change. Like when I started, I had a job. I was working in a hospital with like a 20-minute commute. It was all on Long Island. And I met the devotees, and I got some beads, and I was reading. It wasn't Bhagavad Gita first, but there was a book called The Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. A very nice book, And I was inspired to start chanting. And so I did my little yoga practice at home, my little asanas and things. And then I did my singing little, and then I did my japa, and then I did my meditation, and then I went off to work. And now I kind of integrated into that. And so gradually I became attracted more and more to Krishna because I was leading a pure life. I became a vegetarian and everything. So I didn't make any radical change. I was still doing my job. And I had an apartment and a car and everything. But I was kind of, Krishna made me a little restless. I wasn't satisfied with that.
Someone considered going vegetarian to be pretty radical.
In those days, yeah. Well, it wasn't just vegetarian. This was raw food with a lot of juices. This is like, I got it good. But anyway, at a certain point, I got to the point, this mantra has really got me, and I just want to go to a yoga place where I can just chant as much as possible. Because I would be chanting, and I'd go to the yoga studio, the asanas, and I'd have to stop and do that. But then when I went to the temple, the more you chant, I said, keep on chanting, taking out the garbage, chanting. And it was very delightful, So it kind of is revealed if you just follow the process at your own speed, what's best for you. But there's certain things that we all do together that are really the essence of it: chanting, the dancing, feasting.
Well, you can also read the text that we passed recently. It has all the little qualities.
Describes, yes, you can see. Well,
reflect on yourself. What qualities do resonate within myself?
Yeah, just get one of these copies. They have a softback version that's pretty cheap. It's got the same. All right, let's move on. Are we on text 48? I think so, right? Sahajam karma kaunteya sadosham apinat chajet sarvadam bahidoshena dhumenagnir ivavataha. Every endeavor is covered by some fault, just as fire is covered by smoke. Therefore, one should not give up the work born of his nature, O son of Kunti, even if such work is full of fault. Purport: in conditioned life, all work is contaminated by the material modes of nature. Even if one is a Brahmin, he has to perform sacrifices in which animal killing is necessary. Similarly, a Kshatriya, however pious he may be, has to fight enemies. He can't avoid it. Similarly, a merchant, however pious he may be, must sometimes hide his profit to stay in business, or he may sometimes have to do business on the black market. These things are necessary. One cannot avoid them. Similarly, even though a man is a Shudra serving a bad master, he has to carry out the order of the master, even though it should not be done. Despite these flaws, one should continue to carry out his prescribed duties, for they are born out of his own nature. A very nice example is given herein. Although fire is pure, still there is smoke. Yet smoke does not make the fire impure. Even though there is smoke in the fire, fire is still considered to be the purest of all elements. If one prefers to give up the work of a Kshatriya and take up the occupation of a Brahmin, he is not assured that in the occupation of a Brahmin there are no unpleasant duties. One may then conclude that in the material world, no one can be completely free from the contamination of material nature. This example of fire and smoke is very appropriate in this connection. When in wintertime one takes a stone from the fire, sometimes smoke disturbs the eyes and other parts of the body, but still one must make use of the fire despite disturbing conditions. Similarly, one should not give up his natural occupation because there are some disturbing elements. Rather, one should be determined to serve the Supreme Lord by his occupational duty in Krishna consciousness. That is the perfectional point. When a particular type of occupation is performed for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord, all the defects in that particular occupation are purified. When the results of work are purified, when connected with devotional service, one becomes perfect in seeing the self within, and that is self-realization. So one of the things I was just thinking, I was reading this, is that we should always remember that Krishna's overarching purpose here is to prevent Arjuna from, giving up his duty and taking up the role of a yogi or a sannyasi, which he's not suited for. And so, and Arjuna himself, if you go way back to the first and second chapter at the beginning, there's that famous verse where he surrenders to Krishna as his guru rather than as a friend, and they're arguing back and forth. Because karpan nidosho pahata svabhava. And what he's saying there is that all of this concern I have, this miserly hesitancy to fight on the basis of these personal relationships I have with those on the other side, this has upahata svabhava. It has taken away my natural nature. It has made me lose my martial spirit. Because he's thinking of going off to the forest, he's dropped his bow, which is a disaster for the Kshatriya. And so in that, he realizes that this consideration that he's just had for the whole first chapter and part of the second is not doing him any good. He's paralyzed, he's miserable, he's crying. And so in that mood, he approaches Krishna in kind of a helpless way. He says, I can't figure it out. Please tell me what is my real dharma. I'm confused about what my dharma is here. So tell me for certain. And that is the foundation of the whole thing. The next thing Krishna says is, Ashochanam Ashochastram Pragyabharam Shabhasha, say, you're lamenting for what is not lamentable. You're speaking like a pundit, but it's foolish. In other words, you're thinking you have these relationships of friendship and personal and, with those on the opposite side, and I don't want to kill them. But there's a higher duty, there's a higher meaning, and that's Krishna's purpose, which is to reinstitute Dharma in the world, which is to benefit millions of people by installing Yudhishthira as the king rather than Duryodhana. So that was Krishna's plan, and now Arjuna is a key element in it, and he's hesitating to work. So that's Krishna's being like, don't try to take on the role of a Brahmin and go off to the forest, You're not suited. You simply follow your nature and do it for me, and everything will be perfect. Everything will come out right. And Arjuna will say at the end, yes, Karashe Vachanantava. I'll do as you say, though it works. Oh, I keep doing this. Okay. Hare Krishna. All right, let's go on. Text 49. Asakta buddhi sarvatra. Okay. Jitatma vigataspaha. Naishkarmya siddhim phalamam. Sannyase nadigacchati. One who is self-controlled and unattached and who disregards all material enjoyments can obtain by practice of renunciation the highest perfect stage of freedom from reaction. Purport. Real renunciation, and don't forget the title of this chapter is The Perfection of Renunciation. Real renunciation means that one should always think himself part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and therefore think that he has no right to enjoy the results of his work. Since he's part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, the results of his work must be enjoyed by the Supreme Lord. This is actually Krishna consciousness. The person acting in Krishna consciousness is really a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life. By such a mentality, one is satisfied because he is actually acting for the Supreme. Thus he is not attached to anything material. He becomes accustomed to not taking pleasure in anything beyond the transcendental happiness derived from the service of the Lord. A sannyasi is supposed to be free from the reactions of his past activities, but a person who is in Krishna consciousness automatically attains this perfection, because without even accepting the so-called order of renunciation. This state of mind is called yoga rudha, or the perfectional stage of yoga. As confirmed in the 3rd chapter, yastvatma rata eva syat. One who is satisfied in himself has no fear of any kind of reaction from his activity. So, Jitatma, so he's getting back to this perfection of sannyas. Remember, that's how the whole chapter started. And what is the real sannyasi? Probably tells the renounced order of life, but really, all of us can be sannyasis without the formality. And sannyas, it means complete renunciation. Nyas, right? So what's the purpose of that? It's not that we just want to, take a whole bunch of our stuff that's in our room and throw it into the gutter and say, oh, I've given up a lot of stuff. That's a waste. Some of it can be used in Christian service, The whole idea of sannyas, it's really in our tradition, more emphasized ultimately than sannyas is vairagya. Vairagya. And here's the difference. Sannyas is literally giving up. That's why you see the sannyasis, they're so austere, and the ideal was the 6 Goswamis who didn't even have a place to live. They just lived under a different tree. They hardly ate anything. They lived as austerely as you can possibly do, especially Raghunath Das Goswami. But they were very satisfied in their lives, and they were very wealthy in the most important thing, which is prema dhana, the treasure of love of Godhead. I love this verse, the 4th verse of the Goswami Astika, the 6th Goswami song. It says, Tyaktva turnam ashesha mandalapati shreni sadatuchavat budva dina ganeshikau karonaya kaupina kantashrito gopi bhavara samratabda lahadi kalola magno mohor vande rupa sanatano rehi goshi jiva gopalako. So 3 of them, at least, were very wealthy. Raghunath Das Goswami, he was like you can visualize the son of billionaires, very wealthy landowners. His uncle was, I don't know if it was his given name, but it was Hiranya Majumdar. Hiranya means gold. It may have been a nickname or whatever. But he was very, very wealthy, and his brother, Raghunath Das's father, was also very wealthy, Zamindar. And Raghunath was the only son. He was the sole heir. And they had married him to a wonderful, chaste, beautiful lady, He had all the things. But he became enthralled with Lord Chaitanya. And he wasn't interested. He kept running away, and they had to try to get him and bring him back. Finally, they had guards, And so eventually he escaped by a ruse. I won't mention how, and he went for 12 days. He's walking in the forest with no eating, just maybe drinking a little water. And he finally got to Lord Chaitanya in Jagannath Puri, And he stayed there until Lord Chaitanya disappeared for, 18 years or so. And he witnessed all of these wonderful pastimes. And so he was the wealthiest, but he became the emblem of the greatest renunciant. The other Goswamis, they conquered over eating, and sex life wasn't even a question. Sleeping, they hardly slept. But Raghunath Das outdid them all. Every 3 days he would eat a little buttermilk, and he got so skinny, But he lived in the 70s, he lived there in Radhakund. So, but here's the story in that verse. So they gave it up, Tyaktva turnam, without hesitating. Turna means right away. As soon as they met Lord Chaitanya, they were ready to go. Sanatana Goswami had to bribe his way out of jail to get it free, but he was free. He was the prime minister of the government, and Rupa Goswami was the finance minister. So you can imagine Rupa Goswami, when he cashed out, he had a whole boat of gold that he then divided. He gave 1/4 to his relatives because they expect something. They cause a lot of trouble there. 1/4 and 1/2, I think he gave. For the service to the Brahmins and the devotees, and then 1/4 for emergencies, which was good because he was able to. Sanatan was able to use it to bribe the jailer and get free. So Chaktva Turnam, they immediately gave it up. At Tuchavat, insignificant, all this influence and power and pelf and everything, forget it. And what did they do? Budva Dina Ganeshako. For the sake of uplifting the wretched of the earth, all of the non-devotees. In other words, they took on the role of going to Vrindavan, writing those books, excavating all the places of pastimes, building temples. They didn't, what did they have? They had no money, but they would be wealthy Vaishnav businessmen who would come, and how can I help you? How can I serve you? Build a temple. That's how the first temple was built, Madan Mohan, Sanatan Goswami, still there. So anyway, so Karunaya, out of their mercy, Kopina Kantashrito. They wore little loincloths and rejected clothes, you know, and as I mentioned, as described elsewhere, they lived under a different tree every night, hardly ate or slept. But what did they do, you know? Gopi Bhavadasam Bhatavdalahadi Kallola Magno Mahor. They were diving in the highest, in the ocean of the gopis' love for Krishna. They were experiencing the highest intense bliss, you know, that's not dependent on the senses. It was a temporary flight. They were always in that mood and experiencing the highest pleasure. So they gave up all this material stuff, but they got something a million times more valuable. So the idea is that Krishna consciousness, this is real sannyasa, vairagya. When you practice Krishna consciousness, there's an element of austerity there. The 4 regular principles: no meat eating, no gambling, no intoxication, and no illicit sex. You know, so famously, you know, they tried that. They suggested that one of Prabhupada's godbrothers to how he can become a Brahmin when you just follow these principles. He was a lord in England. They went to England. He said, impossible. That's our life. That's what all of those things are our life. You know, we can't give that up. Well, then you're stuck. But if you can give them up, by the strength of chanting and praying, you know, getting the spiritual strength, then before long, it's not an austerity anymore. You know, like Yamunacharya, this famous verse. Anyway, I won't tell the whole story. It's getting like, but he chanted this verse, and he said, because he was a king, and then he became Acharya, Yamunacharya. And he had all opportunities for sense gratification. So he said, every time, now, ever since, at every moment, I've been relishing the mellow of serving Krishna's lotus feet. Since that time, whenever remembrance comes up, because things will pop up into the mind, you know, he was a king, of sex life, and, you know, when I spit at the thought, you know, it's not like I have to really control my senses. Forget it, you know. So that's vairagya. You lose the taste for these lower things because it's purified the taste for serving Krishna. And one final thought, because we're running out of time, and that is the whole idea is that, okay, so I'm working hard, but I have to give the results to Krishna, so why should I work hard? You know, and the whole idea is that, as Prabhupada mentions, you're taking pleasure in the pleasure of the Lord. This is what love means, you know, that just by chanting Krishna's name, He's pleased. He's pleased by that, even if you're not, you know, pure, but you're chanting. You started chanting, and how does he reciprocate? He gives you a little more taste for Krishna, for Himself. You know, makes you more interested and less interested in Maya. In other words, Maya is releasing her grip on you, proportionate to your engaging in Krishna consciousness. And that's the vairagya. It comes naturally. And that's why it's said right at the beginning in this wonderful series of verses in the 2nd chapter, 1st canto, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Payojya Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chayira Hoitakam. By serving Vasudev, Krishna, very quickly. You have to, you know, this is one of the first benefits. Janayat Yashu Vairagyam Jnanam. You get natural knowledge and detachment. And they go together. You know, if you know, you know, there's like, say, someone offers you a joint or something, you know, or a pill, buy the pill if you like to buy it. And you say, oh yeah, I remember I took that pill last time, it was really nice, you know. But then someone says, no, this is contaminated with fentanyl, you could die. As soon as that knowledge comes, you lose your desire for it, isn't it? That's the vairagya produced by the knowledge. So that's why Krishna says, and we're going to end in this with my favorite verse, Yehi sangsparjija boga, dukkha yonaya evate, ajandabantam konteya nate shuramate vida. Intelligent persons don't take part in the pleasures that are due of the contact of the senses with the sense objects. O son of Kunti, Krishna says in the 5th chapter. Such pleasures are the sources of misery, and they have a beginning and an end. And so the wise do not delight in them. So where do we get pleasure? Because we enjoy. You get pleasure when by contacting the spirit, the pure spirit, Krishna. It doesn't have a beginning and an end, and it's definitely not a source of misery. Just the opposite. If we learn how to take pleasure in giving Krishna pleasure, that is the perfection of our life. That's called pure devotion. And it doesn't end, even with the body. You see, even when you're getting old, So that's the great thing. We saw that with Prabhupada, that he was always peaceful and joyful throughout his life. All right, it's 10 to 10, so we have time for just one short poem. Okay. So I had even brought my iPad to read a poem, but I don't have time for that. So here's a nice prayer to Krishna. Bhujanga da Pachanda Gaspada da Kanda Chudankore, Niranka Shadraganchada Brahmina Badna Bringam Brahme. Patanga duhatustati, Vanakutira Keri Priye Padaspadatume Mahus, Try Mukunda Shudharati. Says, you wear the best of crests, a crown of perfect peacock plumes. Your dancing glances stun the bees meandering midst the blooms. You relish love play in a cottage by Kalindi's shore. O Krishna, may pure love for you be mine forevermore. That's the best prayer. So as we chant Hare Krishna, we can pray like that. There's Radha Giridhari, and there's Radharani with her Abhaya Mudra. Don't worry, everything's going to be all right. You see? Yeah, look at Radharani on the altar, you'll see. It's like Abhaya Mudra. She's giving the gift of fearlessness. All glory to Srila Prabhupada.